get started just because it's 1 o'clock. It's,
Yeah. I'll do it at the end of the meeting.
yeah, he'll do it at the end, yeah. Well, thank you guys for coming today. I guess you've got it on record. You might want to, okay. This is the fun part. This is the part about taking care of people with special needs. For me, was the best time ever. And there's no fancy pictures here. I'm just going to tell you stories and give you the information that you would need to go out and make a home visit should you, in your world, decide to do that. We're going to talk a little bit about why in the world you would do such a thing. And people looked at me like I had lost my mind. And mind you, this wasn't that long ago. This was in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. This was maybe at worst case 20 years ago. And people still do it, but they don't talk about it because people think they're nuts, okay? How do you do it and keep an office open? That's what I get asked. I'm gonna show you how to do it. What do you take when you go? Wish now so much that we had taken pictures when we were on the road, but it never occurred to me to do that because it was part of work. And how to evaluate the home. Why do you do this? Why would you even go in someone's home? I'll tell you some stories here in a minute. Who in here's had a person with special needs in their home that they had to care for? Anybody in here? It's a trip, let me tell you. If you've never had to do it, and all of a sudden you're faced with it, not only is it intimidating, but no matter how smart you are, or what your background is, it's very scary. And no matter how much you want to do it, it doesn't take away from that fear factor. And what you have to try to do as a physician is get the people through that fear factor and get them comfortable with taking their person home. They are frightened to death to put this person in a vehicle. And rightfully so. It's not fun. Backstory. I was in the middle of a bad baby at a rural hospital, getting them intubated, getting them shipped out, and they called me and they said, you have to come home. He can't breathe. And I'm like, I can't leave. I'm sterile. I'm putting a UAC in. I can't go. Long story short, my other child's girlfriend, she was the only one around there. Well, he was old enough to drive, but he couldn't drive because he couldn't breathe. She drove him to the hospital in her car with his neb machine plugged into the cigarette lighters so he could take a treatment while he was driving. That wasn't bad. Bad as somebody's not breathing. So it's really scary to try to take these people in cars. You have to make appointments. This is when time management is huge, is when you want to try to do home visits. You know, you have to pick a certain time during the week. We didn't go every week. We didn't need to. At first, you might need to go a little more often until the person gets comfortable with everything and the family gets comfortable with everything. But we only went every other week, and we went on Friday. And we jumped in the purple RAV4 with a sign on the side at 7 o'clock in the morning and have everything we needed in the back. And we didn't come home till 7 o'clock that night because we went far. We went on to 3 counties and probably made between 10 and 15 visits depending on the day. And we worked. And the person that went with me, we had 2 office staff that signed up to be crazy. And they took turns, so they didn't have to do it every time we went. And one was they were both my kids, both of them were EMTs. So they worked in the office, so it worked out. Any of the office staff can go that can do things. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you have to make time for this, and it has to be regular, so not only you know when you're going, but the family knows when you're coming. So why do this anyway? What's the purpose of this? Who needs a home visit? Does everybody need a home visit? No, not so much. But anybody who's home and is ventilator dependent, they're on mechanical ventilation, they need to be seen at home. Yes, there are ventilator clinics, certainly at some of the children's hospitals. And even some of the adult care centers have a ventilator clinic. But wait, what? What if you don't live just right down the street from a tertiary care center? What if you live in Venus, Texas? There ain't nothing near Venus, Texas. Hey, What if you live where I live? I live in Miller Grove. Nobody knows where that is. You can get to a hospital, but it's a county hospital and they don't have this kind of stuff. Do I really want to drive to Dallas with this person on a ventilator? And sit for hours and sitting there with a bunch of people who have been running through there that were sick? Oh no. They need a home visit. Some people are just very sensitive to changes in environment and movement. People who for some reason either were born without an immune system or have lost their immune system secondary to chemotherapy, biologic medications, whatever. You don't want to go, you don't want them out there with that stuff. And sometimes they don't need to be handled a lot, especially, I'll just give you a great example, a preemie who finally went home, a 23-weeker who finally went home after 6 months. They may not be on a ventilator, but they're still really, because they've been in a very rigid environment for so long, any change can affect their breathing, their heart rate, any of that stuff. So what you want to do is handle them as little as possible, and you want to reduce as much movement as possible. And some people don't do well with a change of environment, even if they're well. So think about that for a minute. Some of these people have been in ICU for, like I told you last week, for 4 years. They don't want to go back. And they know where they're going. So you have to pick and choose. But a lot of these people are going to have to go see subspecialists who are not going to come to their home. So you want to reduce the trips out as much as possible. What do you do in the office? Well, you're not going to be in that day, so you make sure the front office knows not to schedule patients for you that day. Now, if you are super lucky, like I was the last year in practice, I had a PA working with me who was perfectly capable of handling whatever came in. If you're in the office with other physicians, first of all, you have to kind of tell them, hey, I'm going to make home visits. And if they're not okay with that, maybe you chose unwisely. But that's one of the things, if you get a job with a group, is to see what their mindset is. And if they don't want you doing it, it's not going to be successful for you. That's another reason to go into private practice. So that way you can do whatever you want. And make sure that you try to pick the same day. We always went on Friday. We didn't change our days. Anything else, if our patients got in trouble, we handled over the phone as much as possible. And the first couple of weeks these people go home, especially if they've been hospitalized for a long time, they're going to need more frequent visits. You may have to go every week until you get everything straightened out. You got to get their address. You got to find out where it is. Back in the old days, we had paper maps. Now we can do it on our phone, which makes it a lot easier. So you can kind of get an idea how long it's going to take you to get from point A to point B, and then go see another patient over here at point C, so that you can give them a ballpark of what time you're going to get there. That's really important for the family because they've got all these. Remember last week we talked about the patient's schedule, what they got to do here and here and here, and they got to have naps and feed them and all this stuff. And I think most office visits I made, most home visits lasted a minimum of 45 minutes. I was mostly there an hour. We got there, everybody glad-handed. They usually had a Diet Pepsi waiting on me, and because that was my drug of choice a long time ago. And you know, they want to sit and visit with you because it's family, right? And so it takes a little while. And I always had somebody with me, and make sure the person you take with me can do weights, heights, do a venipuncture if you need to. They are fairly familiar with the different kinds of equipment. Next lecture is all about equipment. And people who can help you take care of the patient, because you may have to draw blood or whatever, and we're getting that in just a minute. What do you need? What do you need to take on these visits? I have a little travel bag. It looks like a briefcase, but it's not, because it has anything I needed to draw blood, any kind of needle, butterflies, whatever. It had all kinds of stuff. Nowadays, it's easier because you just take your computer. You don't have to drag a bunch of charts with you. We dragged charts with us, paper charts back in the day. But hold this thought. You need to bring your internet with you, okay? Either as a hotspot on your phone that works or a gadget. Here's why. This stuff is all protected information. You don't want to use the family's internet because you don't know what firewalls they've got. You don't know how secure it is. And it's probably not if it's not your internet. Or if you don't want to do that, write your notes and put them in the computer when you get back to work. Now that takes a little bit more time, and I'm kind of lazy and I like to do it on the fly. So I'd take a hotspot. I take my computer with my internet with me everywhere. It's a little box about that big. It's the same price as a cell phone every month, and it goes wherever I go. And as long as I got signal, I got internet, and it's secure. So I don't use hotel internet either. That's a bad idea. You need to take the things you always have: a stethoscope, an otoscope, a thalmoscope. You need reflex hanger, tongue blades. You see all the things there that you need to take. If you think you're going to need anything to do with needles or sharps, you need to make sure you bring a OSHA certified container. They make little small ones. The same thing with red bags, and we'll get to more to red bags here in a little bit. Be sure and bring all the blood drawing equipment that your lab requires, because otherwise you totally stuck this person and you're not going to be able to use the sample, and that's annoying, especially for the patient. So make sure you have all your equipment. So what does that mean? That means you got to know who you're going to see, what their diagnosis is, what's likely to be needed. This is before you get in the car to go. You need to make sure you have a list so that you know who you're seeing. And you can do this a week in advance and get everything together and put it in your travel bag, and then you're good to go. You won't have to worry about scrambling that same day. Everything we used on home visits was in a plastic tote in the office. It didn't change. The only time anything changed is when we had to add to it for some reason or another. That way it was all in one place all the time, and all we had to do is pick that tote up and stick it in the car, and we were ready to go. Here's some things you might need. We always took culturettes and things like that with us in case we had to get a culture, especially if the parents and caregivers had called us and said, you know, there's some kind of oozy stuff coming out of their port, or there's nasty stuff around their ostomy bag. You want to know what it is, so you're going to bring a culture, and you can do that. And you can take a little portable cooler with you. We always did anyway, because we took vaccines on the road. We did everything, and we'll get to that in a minute. And this way, you know, you got everything collected. With the little coolers, you can, you know, you've seen those little Yeti coolers. They're about this big and they work great. If you're going to take the computer, make sure it's got a charge. It's highly embarrassing to get where you're going and your equipment doesn't work. This talks about that sort of thing, using hotspots and what have you. We do a complete physical exam. It's not shortcutted just because we're in their house. We do it just like we do it if they were in the office. And also that includes giving any kind of guidance that the parents and caregivers might need. They might need to know what's next. They might need to know, do we need to make this specialty visit sooner after you've examined the patient? And also, it's a good time to talk about what the other agencies have done that you got, because remember we talked about making a team last week. What does the rest of the team think? And it may be that once a month or once every 6 weeks, you get all the team members together on the phone and say what's going on, because they may have different thoughts than you, because they're there more than you. You need to make sure you address nutrition. This is huge, because most people don't. And some people will go home on tube feedings or a very elemental diet. And you want to make sure that it's being advanced if it's appropriate, and what it's being advanced to. You don't go straight from tube feeds to McDonald's. That's a no-go. You have to make sure that it's something that whoever dietitian or whomever started it, it's continuing to progress. I've actually seen people be on tube feedings way after they didn't need to be on tube feedings, and to be on an inappropriate amount of calories and not be gaining weight and not be functioning. So it's important to address nutrition. Also remember, when you're making these home visits, you don't know where you're going to go. I went everywhere from a $1 million house out in Irving to some little place down in Balch Springs where I almost fell through the bathroom floor when I went to wash my hands. I mean, anything in between. And you just have to you have to understand that that's where they live, and you have to work around and help them if they need something. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that too. You should give it vaccines if it's appropriate, if it's time. They're going to get their vaccines on time. This because they're at the house doesn't mean you can't give their vaccines. Now you need to look and see who's in the house. Back in the day, it was a bigger deal because we did oral polio, which we don't do anymore, and you had to make sure you didn't have any immune compromised people in the house. But now it's not a big deal. And if the patient is not immune compromised, there's no reason they can't have their vaccines on time. And that includes flu vaccines and whatever else is appropriate for that particular individual. You just take them with you and give them. You don't have to go anywhere. I've even been known to give the parents and caregivers shots because they couldn't leave to go to their physician and get their vaccines. So think about that too. And you give them the vaccine information just like you would in the office. And there's going to be more people in that house than just the patient and maybe parents and caregivers. There are going to be aunts and uncles and other siblings and whoever lives in the house. You have to be okay with that. You know, sometimes you have to be okay with the fact it's a 3-bedroom home and there's 12 people living in it. And you have to be okay with that. You can't be judgmental in any way because that's where they live. And they may not have another alternative, but you can, without being obnoxious and mean, look around and see what it looks like. I told you, I walked in a house and almost fell through the bathroom floor. It was a little bit scary for me. But one of the next things we did, I looked at my child and I said, Chris, call your friends at Habitat. We called Habitat for Humanity and they were out there the next day and fixed their bathroom floor and also put a ramp so that they could get the person with cystic fibrosis in and out of the house because they couldn't walk up steps. And there was no way for them to even come out of the house. Even if they had to call 911, they were going to have to go out on a stretcher. So those are things you're going to notice when you go into people's homes. And it's not because you're nosy or mean or go ooh. It's because you need to make everyone as safe as possible. They might be cluttered, but that may be as good as it gets for them. If you're living in a house that has 800 square feet and there's 10 people living there, they don't have much space each. So the patient, what you want to look at for the patient is it safe? Are they in an area that's safe? Are there any things there that could possibly be unsafe, like something plugged in over a sink that might get wet? That's something, and they may not know. The home care people may have told them, but they may have changed it. Make reasonable suggestions, offer to help, and see what kind of help they'll accept. Not everybody will accept everything. You have to be on board with that too, but you do the best you can. And again, it might not be clean like your house, but it might be okay for them. And as long as it's not super unsanitary with, filthy rags and stuff lying around the patient, I'm not going to fuss about it. Now, all that said, you need to ask where they're getting rid of the medical waste. If they're just putting it in the regular trash, this is not good. And they should probably know that needles don't go there. But most people, a few go home giving injections or something like that, and they've already been instructed with that. But you need to know where these used tape and gauze and diapers and all that stuff's going. So you need to provide them with some of those red bags. The hospital will give them to you sometimes for free. But they can put them in Walmart bags and take them to the hospital, and the hospital will dispose of any medical waste for them free of charge. Interesting. When you go to wash your hands, find out what's there. If there's no soap, note to self. If there's no towels or it's a dirty, filthy cloth towel, note to self, get some paper towels. And if they can't afford them or can't give them, you can reach out and help them with those kinds of things too. But those are things you look at a home visit that nobody else has looked at ever, because the people at the hospital didn't go home with them. The home care people come in and they've got their job and they do their job, and they're not going to say anything unless it's just horrible. So it's kind of your job when you make a home visit to look at everything. And you don't have to be obvious about it, but you can sure tell a lot when you go into someone's home. Now, occasionally, and this has actually happened to me, it's so bad that you got to call the Department of Human Services because it's just not safe. And it's just not safe, and there's no air conditioning, and they're on the 3rd floor, and there's no elevator, and there's somebody there on a ventilator, and you walk in the home, and it's 95 degrees in the home. And the people who are not on a ventilator are probably they're not feeling so good either, but the person on the ventilator has a high heart rate. They've got elevated body temperature. There's nothing they can do. That's when you have to jump in. You may end up with Child Protective Services or Adult Protective Services taking care of this person. And occasionally what you find is people have been sent home with a caregiver who themselves are ill, okay? Who really can't take care of this person, and nobody dug deep enough to find out that they couldn't take care of them. And those people that's when you have to get the Department of Human Services involved. But you need to tell these agencies, hey, I'm the ringleader. I'm running this show. If you have a trouble or an issue or a comment or anything, you call me. Don't be going out there finding other physicians to do stuff over the phone, because I know these people really well. And you don't have to be mean about it, but just make it clear that you are the attending physician and that you are in charge of this person's care, and that you want to know what recommendations are going to be made or what sort of moves are going to be made next. And it happens. This sort of thing happens. And it's sad, but sometimes it does. And so you have to be able to work around it and make sure that it happens, and make sure that the family understands that this is not forever. This is until we can get you a safe place for your person and for you, because this isn't working. You know, this is not good for anybody. And sometimes what happens, it was just on TV in Houston about 2 weeks ago, where there was an apartment complex that the elevator was broken for a year. Nobody could go anywhere. And if you've got a bunch of people with disabilities who have to get out, and the only way they can go is by elevator, they're stuck in that room forever. And again, there's not probably a whole lot of people around here that make home visits. I haven't run into a whole lot in my life. Those are people that need home visits for sure. But then you run into some of these other places that you see on TV where the one that they showed a couple nights ago, where there was water was coming in somehow under the rug, the carpet, and it was moldy, and people are getting sick from mold. Those are the things you look at, and they had already called everybody they could call, and nobody was going to help them. So these are some things you got to look at. You got to be ready to do that. What about transportation? Guess what? Physicians have to do that too. Eventually, you have to get the little cute tag. That's something else you can do on a home visit, is find out what kind of a vehicle they have. No, not everybody needs a $80,000 equipment, a van with all kinds of cool stuff on it. But you might need a car that can run and get more than 10 miles, which I've actually been in situations where they were doing good to get back and forth 5 miles to work, much less make a 50-mile trip to a subspecialist. And does the vehicle have air conditioning if you live in Texas? These people don't tolerate heat very well. And if you're in a hot car for 2 or 3 hours, it might take its toll if you already have a disability. And again, some parents and caregivers have got disabilities such that they can't drive anyway. So you got to find some way for this patient to get transportation. And it could be a community service organization if you're lucky enough. Some churches and religious groups have a volunteer service to help transport people to physician appointments. And then you will probably be asked to get one of these tags here, and there's a bunch of paperwork involved in that. But these are some things you need to find out when you make a home visit. If you roll up to the house and there's no vehicle in the lot, maybe somebody's at work. But if somebody's at work and that's the only vehicle, and somebody has to get out to get something, we have a problem. We run out of something. Or what if you spill the medicine and you got to get another one and the pharmacy won't deliver? I mean, just think about these things. People don't think about this stuff until you're in that situation, then it's a problem. And that person's probably not going to be able to just leave work and come home and take care of it. So those are some things to think about when you make a home visit. So what happens now? Some people graduate to office visits. They get rid of a bunch of their equipment. They come off the ventilator. They feel better. They want to see the inside of your office because they've seen you for a year, and they make it to the office. and it's a big deal. It's, hey, how are you? This is our home. Um, I think you have to make sure the family's okay with that. Even if the patient's ready to go, you got to make sure that parents and caregivers are comfortable with moving to that kind of a visit. Some of that's going to depend on distance, what kind of vehicle they have, and how comfortable they are with transporting the person. If they're still not comfortable, don't give up your home visits. It's not worth the aggravation on the family and caregivers to have them just so they can show up in your office. When did we see them? And we found that having appointments for people with special needs was best first appointment of the day, the last appointment of the evening, if it looks like it was going to be okay. And I saw a lot of my people with special needs on Saturday when they graduated to the office, just because it was easier for the parents and caregivers to come and bring them, because many of them didn't have to work on Saturday, or they could arrange their schedule so they could be off on Saturday. And it worked out really well. But I like to see them first thing in the morning. It wouldn't bother me. Sometimes they want to come at 7 o'clock in the morning. I said, cool, I'll be there. That way they didn't have to interact with all the other things that come into the office, even though we had separate sick and well waiting room. Some people brought their people to the office sick and sat in the well side. So you never know, especially people with immune compromise, you want to do that. Go back. So other things that you need to take into consideration when you do this home visit thing is how much time you're going to spend doing it. And we've got a whole section coming up in the next, a few lectures from now, on how to get paid to make a home visit. I'll mention a little bit about it here, just so you know. Yes, you can get paid for a home visit. There are codes for that. Used to not be. I made my own codes up. I got paid. You're not going to get rich off of it because it's a lot of time involved. But it probably pay your gas and compensate you for the vehicle that you're going to use. It's probably your personal vehicle. And what we did, we just had a magnetic sign that said Allen Pediatrics and stuck it on the side of my purple RAV4, and that's what we went in. And what we did when we went into different communities, because I spent a lot of time down in the barrios of Dallas, they see the purple car coming, and they made sure that La Doctora was taken care of, because I was there to see 3 or 4 people. And it was like, hey, how you doing? Hola. It was great. And they knew we were coming. Were we careful? Yeah. Not stupid. But we were doing a good thing, and they knew it. So what will happen when you make home visits is a community where you find yourself will know that you do that, and the word will spread, and you'll have a lot of home visits on your hands, which is not a bad thing, because not everybody needs one. You're not going to go make, some people now, there's a whole end of medicine now. It's all home visits. It's direct primary care. And many of those people make home visits just for people who don't have disabilities. And back in the old days, that's how we did it anyhow. I don't think I saw the inside of a doctor's office till I was probably 12, because our pediatrician came to the house because they could. I guess, I don't know if I guess they got paid. I don't know. I wasn't worried about it back then. But I can tell you that going to the homes of people with disabilities is rewarding on both ends, because it takes a huge burden off the family and caregivers. And it actually takes a big burden off of you, because you can see more and do more and help more when you go and meet the family. You find out who might be sabotaging the patient's care. I mean, I walked into a house and I found out one of the younger siblings was going in and playing with the ventilator, and mom didn't know until this child all the alarms were started to go off, and he couldn't breathe. And we finally figured it out, because when I was there doing his regular checkup, this child came in and started playing with the ventilator. And I'm like, wait, what? Nope, we can't have that. And so what we had to finally figure out how to do is put the ventilator inside a locked tote, so that this child, who was, I think, 3 at the time, couldn't get in there. Because we couldn't just say, you can't go in there and be with your brother. You know, you couldn't separate them. So you had to do something. We figured out all kinds of strange things to keep little children out of medical equipment. But those are some things that you get to do by making home visits. And you also find out if you have people in the home who don't really think there's a problem and kind of don't want to help, may actually cause the caregivers much grief. You find out all kinds of things. And it's good because later, if that does come up, you're able to address it. But that's kind of how to do it. And I'm open for any questions on this sort of stuff because it's a blast. Yes, sir.
So I know you said trying to like graduate them.
Mhm.
You said don't have to push them. Is there a certain point where you recognize that it's almost, now it's not beneficial for the patient when it comes to like they need to come out and interact with the environment? How do you go from trying to convince the family members that that's the
I
right?
think what you look at is where they are developmentally in the process of getting better, depending on what happened. Take a good example, traumatic brain injury. They can't do much when they come home. But if they got good physical and occupational therapy, they're gonna walk, they're gonna talk, they're gonna feed themselves, they're gonna do all those things again. And when they are to the point where there's no reason why they can't get in a vehicle and come to the office, you'll know. And the way you present it to the family and caregivers is, "Oh, look at Johnny, look at all the things he can do now. Hey, I've got a great idea. Let's bring him to the office and see if he can get up on the scale." Sometimes that's all it takes. You have to make a reason for them to come. And you have to make it a big event and a big milestone in their rehabilitation. And if you do it that way, instead of any other way, you could say, well, I'm not going to come out to your house anymore because there's no reason why you can't bring them in. Oh, you just lost them. But see what I mean? It's all in the presentation. It's all in how you get them to come to you. And again, if they're horribly afraid, and you'll know if they're horribly afraid, you can tell by talking with them, and you might want to wait a while. But if that person has been rehabilitated to the point where they can get in a vehicle and come and get out, even if it's in a wheelchair, I think you're ready. Good question, though. Anybody got any? Ask me questions. I'll love to answer questions.